Hi everyone! As I'm coming up on the second half of my pregnancy with baby number 2, I have been reflecting on my labor and delivery story with our first daughter, Autumn, and how truly enjoyable of an experience that was. It was the most fun date my husband and I have ever been on, and whether I glamorize it more now that it is over and any pain I endured has left me, I still want to change a thing and very much look forward to bringing our next baby into the world come September. When Autumn was a week old, I sat down and wrote a letter describing her birth story to her so that she could read one day. And right now, I have decided to share that letter with you. This is the birth story of our sweet Autumn Claire. My due date was July 25th, 2014. The weekend of July 18th to 20th, your Auntie Krista came to visit us in Manitoba. Your auntie and I went to IKEA to kill some time while we waited as patiently as we could to meet you. There was a huge puddle of water in the entrance of the store, so your auntie and I thought it would be hilarious to send your daddy and your grandma a text photo message saying, "Jenny's water broke." Well, grandma and your dad didn't find it that funny, but we thought it was hilarious. The weekend came and went, and there were no signs of your arrival in sight. The following weekend, after I was already one day overdue, your grandma and papa, my parents, arrived in Manitoba. They stayed for over a week in hopes to be present for the arrival of what they didn't know at the time would be their first granddaughter. They already had 3 grandsons. We had a great visit, but unfortunately, Friday, August 1st rolled around and you still were comfy in my tummy with no signs of wanting to arrive. With tears in our eyes, we said goodbye to Grandma and Papa and continued to wait and pray over your arrival. Even Papa and Grandma were holding on to any hope that they had that you would be born the next day, and they actually stopped in the neighboring city on their way home from Manitoba to Saskatchewan, and they booked a hotel for the night. This was so that they could still be at an arm's length away in the event that I went into labor that evening or morning. On Saturday, August 2nd, at 11 in the morning, Papa and Grandma phoned from their hotel, and I still had very little to report. I didn't know what to tell them. With heavy hearts, your grandparents continued back to their farm in Saskatchewan. I was quickly approaching 10 days overdue, so an induction date to kickstart my labor was set for Monday, August 4th. The closer we got to that date, the more antsy I became, as I really wanted, God willing, to go into labor naturally with no induction medications or interventions. On Saturday evening, around 11:30 p.m., your dad and I went to bed. It was our full intention of going to church in the morning, just like every Sunday, but I woke up in the middle of the night at 2:30 for a quick bathroom trip. I still felt completely fine, and I went back to bed and fell into a peaceful, quiet sleep. A short hour later, however, I woke up to some stomach cramping that was coming and going quite consistently. I resumed myself to the washroom for half an hour before returning to bed. I tossed and turned from about 4 to 5 in the morning with pains in my lower tummy that just wouldn't quit. I finally decided to get up and start timing these contractions. I was excited and anxious to see that they were already under 5 minutes apart and lasting a minute in length. I knew our baby, our sweet gift from God, was coming today. At 6 o'clock, I went back upstairs to wake up your dad. He was so excited. We contacted both sets of our parents, your grandparents, and told them the exciting news. I remember having a bath that morning to see if the contractions were going to die off. When they didn't, we knew it was time to head to the hospital. At 8 a.m., we were on our way. We would have left sooner, but me and your dad were too interested in watching a car restoration show on television, so we waited for that program to end, and then we headed to the hospital. When we arrived at triage at the hospital, we were informed that the labor ward was closed due to an exorbitant amount of babies being born that weekend. They had shut their doors. The triage nurses administered an exam and discovered that I was already 4 centimeters dilated and 100% effaced. After talking to the doctor on call, the nurses gave us the good news that we were able to stay in labor at the hospital instead of having to be transferred to another one. The only condition was that we needed to stay in triage or walk the halls until another room opened up for us. The contractions were getting stronger and more intense, but your dad and I were still able to laugh and smile in between them. The nurses all said I was coping unbelievably well. By the time 11 in the morning rolled around, we were taken to our beautiful and large private room where we would labor, deliver, recover, and stay after you were born for our whole entire care. We had a great nurse who socialized with us as we carried on with our labor experience. I sat on the birthing ball for a while as we all chatted about our families. My contractions grew in intensity over the birthing ball for a while. And at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, I started to consider some pain relief options. I had an exam and they revealed that I was now 6 centimeters dilated. We decided to call the anesthesiologist to administer an epidural to help me rest and cope with the increasing pain. However, he was in surgery. But he was able to get out, and shortly after he arrived, and after 4 failed attempts, he called for the resident anesthesiologist to step in and to try and administer the epidural. Because of my small stature and the small space that was in my back, he was unable to correctly insert the apparatus in and around my spine. I was frozen already, so the extra attempts, they were very manageable in terms of pain. I was just very concerned that they were not going to be able to give me one and I would have to do this naturally. Shortly after 2 p.m., though, the resident assistant inserted my epidural first try. He assured me that the senior resident or the senior anesthesiologist had taught him everything he knew. As soon as the epidural was administered, they discovered that I was in the transition stage of my labor. I was 8 centimeters dilated. The epidural kicked in very fast, and I was feeling very comfortable with no pain from my contractions. By this time, there was a shift change, and we had got a new nurse. She was very friendly, supportive, and outgoing as well. The next 2 hours went by quite enjoyably. I was progressing beautifully and was so excited to meet you. We began to make bets on your arrival. I guessed 8:47 p.m., your dad guessed 7:30 p.m., our nurse guessed 10:30, and our resident doctor, who was in the room with us at the time, guessed 9:13 p.m. At about 4:15, Dad was getting hungry, so he went to meet Grandma and Grandpa Leschied, his parents, in the lobby, who had bought him a Subway sandwich. Moments after he left, your heartbeat either stopped or was lost, and within seconds of this happening, there was about 6 to 8 nurses and doctors flooded into our hospital room. It was a terrifying situation, especially with your dad missing from the room, but I was not alone. I had Jesus with me, and I knew you would be covered in his protection. After your heartbeat was found again, our doctor decided to attach a fetal monitor to your scalp to get a more accurate reading instead of just observing your heartbeat from the outside of my tummy. It was then that they discovered 2 things. I was now 9 centimeters dilated, but you, my girl, my beautiful girl, were facing sunny side up towards the ceiling instead of the optimal position of being downward towards my back. At this time, they decided to break my water in hopes that this motion would help you turn. By 5 or 6 o'clock, I was fully dilated and just had to wait for the sensation to push and for your head to fully engage. I was then informed about the options that I had to deliver. The doctor told me it was doable to deliver a baby that was posterior, face up. However, it would be very difficult and a lot more work. He said I would be looking at 2 to 3 hours of pushing on average, and to prepare myself that often forceps needed to be used to deliver a posterior baby because mothers would always become too worn out after all those hours of pushing. He also told me I might need a drug called Pitocin, which is otherwise known as Pitocin, to intensify my contractions to help bring baby down and make my contractions more effective for pushing. All these words I did not like. This was my one breakdown. I was beginning to become overwhelmed. But our resident doctor, he calmed our nerves, and we had family and friends pray that since your head was not engaged yet, that maybe your body would flip naturally on its own somehow, and that the Lord would save us from our fears. It was now after 9 o'clock p.m. The nurses were about to administer the drug Pitocin to my IV. They had the bag prepped and were walking it over to my IV. I really did not want this drug. When the doctor walked in the nick of time, he told the nurses to stop and asked if he could examine me one more time before they administered this medication. I gave a resounding yes. I was so hopeful that this could be the answer to our prayers. After being examined, I was told you were still face up. However, the doctor was able to flip you upside down, all which I couldn't feel because of the affecting numbing from my epidural. The doctor told me the only reason you were positioned head down was because he was holding you that way, and that as soon as he were to let go, you would flip back up. With this knowledge, he suggested we try something. While still gripping your little tiny head, he wanted me to try and push you down so that he could engage your head and lock it in that position he was holding you in. During this whole examination and discussion, I was eating and enjoying a delicious orange popsicle. So I popped the rest of the popsicle in my mouth and did what the doctor said, and within the first contraction, I was able to push your body down and lock your head in place. Then my doctor celebrated, changed his clothes, called some backup nurses, and said, "We're having a baby in here." They turned on the lights, and by the next contraction, I said, "Okay, I'm ready to push again." And Dad was able to see your head crowning. A few more quick, effective pushes, and you were born. The time was 9:41 p.m. The strength of the epidural made me not feel any pain, and you were born within 10 to 15 minutes of pushing instead of the predicted 2 to 3 hours. All the medical staff were in disbelief that you were my first child since I did such a fast and effective job of delivering you. It was beautiful, wonderful, and everything I could have ever hoped for. Then the doctor placed you immediately on my chest and said the sweetest words, "It's a girl." Your dad and I cried and fell in love instantly. We called all your grandparents, and they rejoiced and celebrated with us over the miraculous work the Lord had done. You are finally here, and every day has been the best day of my life since you were giving to us. You are such an incredible gift from above, and we've prayed and waited 2.5 years for you. The Lord answered our prayers in abundance. I'll love you forever. I'll like you for always. As long as I'm living, my baby you'll be. Robert Munch.